Hello and welcome to our Voices in Montessori podcast, brought to you by the Greenspring Center for Lifelong Learning. As Dr. Montessori says, an education capable of saving humanity is no small undertaking, and we agree, so let's get to work. My name is Tamara Sheasley Ballas, and in today's episode, we're talking about preparing students for high school and beyond, and what does preparation for adult life look like when you're in middle school. My guest today is Sylvia Glassco. Sylvia is the director of the Adolescent Community at Greenspring Montessori School. She has almost 2 decades of experience teaching math and science in a variety of progressive education settings. While in the classroom, Sylvia developed and published several books of math curriculum in the Context for Learning Mathematics series. She also leads teacher development on constructivist math instruction and has presented at the NCTM National Conference, NAIS People of Color Conference, and Maryland Association for Outdoor and Environmental Education Conference. So welcome, Sylvia. So happy to have you. It's taken us a long time to get this scheduled.
Yes, it has.
Glad to have you finally be here sitting in this chair. So let's dig in. We're talking about how we take these young people, they're in the toddlerhood of adulthood, and we're preparing them for adult life, really for high school and then beyond. So where do we start?
Oh my goodness. I mean, we start with adolescents. Who are they? Right? So adolescents are this wonderful and very much maligned and misunderstood age of these young people who are leaving childhood and they're seeing adulthood. They can see what it looks like. They can taste it. They're ready, and so they're looking ahead to who they want to become and what their life is going to look like. And it suddenly feels real and new. So, you have an elementary child and they're like, I'm going to save the planet. It's going to be wonderful. And you have an adolescent and they're like, so what does it look like to have a career in conservation? Do I get to be outside? And they have a whole different perspective on where they're going. And so they're really ready. And that's what's really exciting about these adolescents is they're really ready to work with this purpose of, I'm going to use this work. So right now, my students are doing a budgeting unit. So we're doing formulas, we're doing variables, we're also learning how to use spreadsheets, all this wonderful math stuff, but we're also learning how credit card interest works, and we're learning about the trade-offs and where you're going to live versus your commute versus your expenses. And so we're really, and they are so excited. They're like, yes, after college, I'm going to do this, I'm going to save up and buy a new guitar, and they have all these goals, and they're really excited to make those plans for themselves. And so we have these students who are ready and they're excited and they're motivated. And we want to offer them so many things. So we're offering them in a Montessori program, we're offering them life skills like cooking, like planning, like we're going to go on a spring odyssey. We need to plan a grocery list. We need to plan activities. We need to get directions, all sorts of those like adult planning skills of being in charge of something, taking on a project. And I'm teaching Algebra 1, we're teaching essay writing, we're teaching history and science and all of these things that they're going to need as they go on into high school. And also we're really explicitly teaching some skills like, how do you get information out of a textbook? How do you pass a standardized test? And what does that even look like to, score in a way that you feel good about on a standardized test? But those are skills that they're going to need because our program goes up through 8th or 9th grade, depending. And so then after that, our students are going to high school. After that, they're going to college, and they're going to be learning in this kind of book sense of learning for quite a long time, at least 8 years, maybe more. We don't know. So they're going to be needing these skills of going out and getting this information, but also they're going to be using those skills as they enter the workforce. There's lots and lots of people who need the skill of writing clearly. There are so many people who need to be able to go through the research and say, okay, so what's important? What's already known about this topic that I'm working with in my career in conservation, or that I'm working with in my career in building management, or whatever you're doing? You need to be able to take in information, present it clearly, look at the numbers, look at the data. And so these are skills that they know, they can see, this is something I could be working with as a career, as a lifelong passion.
So you're really talking about them defining themselves in a way that has a long-lasting impact. Like they're defining themselves as people and for their adulthood.
Yeah. Yeah, you've heard me talk about this before too,
Yeah.
and how in adolescence, they're strengthening neural pathways. So they're making choices and strengthening and building skills that are going to be with them for the rest of their lives. So the choices and the passions that they find in adolescence stay with them. And that's one of the reasons that in early adolescence, especially, I have 7th and 8th graders and some work with the 6th graders in my program, they really have to diversify. So please try out the bike repair. Please try out being the receipts manager at the coffee shop. Please try out these different jobs and meet these different adults, because what really clicks for one student is not going to click for another. So we really want to give them a diversity of ways of being in the world. And we want to have a lot of adults around and they can say, that person, I really admire the way that they go about their work. That's somebody I want to seek out. We've had students go up to people outside the program and say, hey, could I talk to you about how you got this job, about how you work every day? What does it look like to be facilities manager? What does it look like to be a librarian? And they go out and they find these partnerships, and we make space for that.
Well, it sounds like you make sure, and I want to cycle back to a lot of what you've talked about, because there's a lot in there.
Yeah.
But you are really making sure that the adolescents, the work is meaningful, right? And purposeful. And part of one of the books that I refer to often, and it's probably a decade old now, but it's called Escaping the Endless Adolescence. And it has a lot of research on how our young people, even 10 years ago, were not taking responsibility. We're not stepping into the world in a way in college and beyond. Um, and part of what they were talking about is their work hadn't had meaning. They were in school and they weren't connected in any way with what they were doing.
Yeah.
And yet everything you're describing, and full disclosure, folks, I actually have somebody currently, I have a child who's currently in that program as an 8th grader. So I also know this to be true from my own experience, but every part of the work has meaning to them. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's critical. I mean, everyone who works with adolescents knows you can lose them in a second. So you need to make sure that they're invested, that they understand what the purpose is for what they're doing. And, the purpose can be, we're writing stories and we want them to be good and compelling. And that's the purpose, is to make my peers really excited about this character. It doesn't have to be an external purpose. It can very much be internal. But that's what gets them to put forth that maximum effort and really get into their work. And, with my 8th years, the high school applications process, it's a big deal. And so they really are invested in the outcome of that process. And so the work together with students, whether we're revising writing or we're revising a brochure, we're picking which schools to apply to, which happens with families, but they talk to their guides about it too. That's real work. And that's really meaningful for those students. And they also need the space to think clearly about, who do I want to become? What program do I want to choose for myself and my study? And I think also, as you're talking about these students who are not like fully developing, not stepping into the world in positive ways, what Montessori wrote about that is that you need to develop through the independence before you can really be a moral participant, somebody who's conscious in interdependence. So we need to give our students that space to grow in their own thinking, in their own work towards their own purposes, and also, as we're doing that, make them aware of the way that their work is impacting others, that their microeconomy work has implications in terms of trash, in terms of resources used, in terms of impact on the community, and start to be aware of the interdependence. But they have to fully develop into their own as a capable adult before they can really see themselves, I'm a capable adult, I know what I'm doing, and I want to make the world better, which of course is the vision, right? That's our goal, is that we have students who are able to care for themselves and others.
Can you talk about that piece specifically, how you work with them on learning to take care of their community and others? I mean, they are at an age where they become very, they feel like everybody's looking at that. You've told me that. And they feel like everybody's looking at them all the time. It's all about them. And how are you then helping them to see the others in their environment? And then I want to talk about the microeconomies that you
Yeah.
alluded to. I mean, we have so many things to talk about, but I think that's really important.
I mean, it is all about them. That is so important developmentally, just like it's all about a toddler, right? It's all about what they're newly experiencing. And so for the adolescents, they're newly experiencing the social world. It's all about what is happening right here and right now. Right now in their humanities class, they're talking about the 20th century, and they really have no idea what happened in the 20th century. It was 25 years ago now. And, their guides are like, but we were born, like, we remember these events. And they're like, right. And so with history, we always want to make sure that we're connecting it to the present day. How are these events having ripple effects now? How do they shape what's happening now? Like, we had a student write an essay on the media and Emmett Till, and then the media and George Floyd. And so comparing, how did that impact create a movement in the 60s or the 50s? How did that start a lot of the progress that was made in the civil rights movement, and how did the media coverage of George Floyd also kickstart and jumpstart things in the lived memory of these adolescents? But they're in the here and now, and the reason they're in the here and now is because they're trying to discover who they are. And that's what they need to know. So they need to write stories and draw and write songs or sing songs or listen to their music even, and just that feeling of who they are is so important. And at the same time, they're suddenly aware of all these other people. Like, there's like a theory of mind jump where they're like, oh my goodness, there's this whole society and all these other people in the room have their own opinions about me. Oh dear God. And of course they misperceive, and they think that everybody's thinking about them all the time.
Right.
But they're all instead thinking about what everybody else thinks of them. And they're all in this, and that's why it gets a bad rap, because it's a really hard place to be in socially. But they're realizing, oh, there are these other people who have these other feelings. And they may be people that I don't even know. It may be people in the past. It may be people in a different country. It may be people that I just don't interact with in my life where I am right now. And they have feelings too. And they're, of course, they have this feeling of oppression because the adults are making the decisions, and they're in this position where they can't make the decisions. And I have another student who like really wishes that her family was driving electric cars and had solar panels on the roof and would just like make the green choices already. But she's not a decision maker at this point to do those things for her family. And so she feels this like disenfranchisement. And it creates this feeling of empathy with other people who have this disenfranchisement. And so they're really, really sensitive and aware of social justice. And that, this is not a Montessori thing. This is throughout education. We realize that adolescents are really attuned to justice, and they're really attuned to society, and they can become passionate advocates. I mean, throughout history, they stage sit-ins, they sit down on buses, they do walkouts. You look at a modern example, we've got Greta Thunberg, who's like, I am young and I see things in black and white, and this is a problem. We're going to fix it now. And they don't have the fear. They just have the urgency. And that's amazing to have that opportunity to look at the world and to say to the students, yeah, you can do something. Let me help you facilitate that. So let's take that urgency and turn it into action, and turn that action into something that has tangible results, because we want to be very careful that we don't discover a bunch of problems that aren't fixable and then become cynical and frustrated and depressed, which is, a huge danger in our current world situation. But to come up with positive next steps, positive places that we can go, and experiences of efficacy. Many years ago, I had students who organized a climate protest in front of the school. And then another group of students was inspired, and they organized a climate protest in downtown Chicago. And then a radio reporter saw us and invited us to come on the radio. And then she said, when you get older, you can vote. And my students were like, what are you talking about? We just organized a protest and we're on this radio show, and the rest of you who can vote better do that. But we're taking action right now.
And what empowerment, like what a beautiful way to be empowered and engaged in the world, and and see through that lens, which is part of, I know, the work of microeconomies as well, is them having the ability to create money, like
Yep.
make money, spend money, manage money, give a service. Do you want to talk a little bit about microeconomies and what that looks like and the skills they're building and even maybe some of the struggles they have?
Yeah. I mean, it's really an interesting proposition to say, like, let's create a business. Any business you want. What are the parameters? And so when you have a group of students who are starting out, like I had the opportunity to restart the program here, and so we didn't have any existing microeconomies, and we sat down and we said, what do we want to do? Well, hang on, what's an economy and how do economies work? And so the way that I did this is that we did games. So we looked at Monopoly, which was in fact invented as a critique of capitalism. That's how it was originally invented. So we played a Monopoly, which they unfortunately they love, but they can see the problems. They can see the way that they behave in these greedy ways. And we played Settlers of Catan, which is a settler colonial game, which has this problem where they're just divvying up and extracting as many resources as they can, but they're also trading, there's cooperation. We looked at Dungeons and Dragons, which is service-based. And so the people in the Dungeons and Dragons economy, they go out and they kill monsters. That's how they make money. They don't make things, they do things for people. So we looked at these different economies and we analyzed other economies like board games, but also computer games the students had. And we said, so what do we want to do? What impact do we want our business to have? And we've come up with several different businesses out of that. You know, there's a business where we grow seedlings, and so we sell the seedlings, and we do heirloom seedlings so that we know that we are continuing this work of stewarding the seed bank, stewarding this communal resources, because we've talked about what's communal and what's privately owned, and seeds are something that many people believe should be owned in common by humanity. And we need to steward these different varieties, not having these hybrid, like copyrighted seeds, but rather things that you can save and share. This year we saved seeds from our tomatoes, and so we're planting tomato seeds that we saved last fall. So that's the first year we've gotten to do that. But then we also have our bike business where we solicit donations of old bikes. We fix them up, so we're doing repair. We don't have a lot of waste created by our business, and then we're trying to sell them back into the community and also promoting biking. That's something we want to promote. Then there's the coffee shop. So we have a coffee shop, and the coffee shop, I think, has been the biggest struggle, because if you look at our society and what a coffee shop looks like, before we even get into the sourcing of the coffee and things like that, you think about your Starbucks cup and you think about the Starbucks cups that are along the side of the road, the straws that are picked up on the beaches, all of these things, there's all of this waste. And so from the beginning, I said to the students, listen, this is a line for me. You know that I'm an environmentalist. You know that these things are very important to me, and we are not going to create waste. We are not going to use disposable cups. And creating this system of reusable cups in a society where we're used to disposable cups, it's a big change. And it's more work, and you have to run the dishwasher, and you have to go back to the elementary classrooms and remind them to please give the mugs back and all of these things. And ultimately it's cheaper and ultimately it's better, but also it requires this active moral choice. And every time there's a new group of students or there's a new opportunity, there's always a new decision point where you have to remake that choice and recommit to that choice, which, you know, from some of my students, they're like, yes, I agree morally with this choice. And some of them are like, well, this is a moral choice that somebody else is valuing. And so I'm going to have to just, you know, compromise and go along with the moral values of my guide here, because we're working together on this project. And then there was
real life.
It is.
That's real life.
And how do you work in a community? And what does your impact have on the whole community? And how do you convince people that they should buy into what you're doing and what you're working on?
Yeah, I think that makes so much sense. And what would you say that the students gain from running these businesses and because they really I mean, they do all the parts of it.
Yes.
They do all the parts.
They write the email to advertise the bike sale. They look at the calendar, they set the dates, they make the posters, they fix the bikes, they go to the bike shop to buy the inner tubes, all of things.
They navigate the budget. I know that you all
they do.
you weren't charging enough, I think, in your bike shop at first, right, to really cover the expenses, and you had to look at that. I mean, that's all a piece of it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, talk about spreadsheets. It's a lot. It's a lot, and it is not always perfect. You know, there are many mistakes along the way, and some of them I'll catch and help correct, and some of them I'll let happen. And then, you know, we've worked our butts off for a net profit of negative $20 because of the pricing, and that's interesting. Yeah, could we have predicted that? So there are a lot of pieces of it, but I think that they learn teamwork is a big thing because they're working together and they're relying on each other. They also learn to kind of look past the immediate, the story of stuff calls this the golden arrow, that moment of buying something. So what is there if you zoom out of that picture and you look at the supplies and you look at the labor and you look at the disposal and you look at all of the consequences of that one act of that money exchanging hands? So that's another wider view and broader understanding that they gain in this project. And of course, they get the organization skills, the communication skills, they get over the hump of reaching out to somebody, of customer service. We've definitely had some workshops on customer service. We're going to have some more because you've got your bikes and you want to sell them and you know that they're a good product, but that's a strange adult you haven't seen before. And so to go up to somebody and say, how can I help you, is actually a huge lift for a lot of these students. And so there are many different aspects, and they're differently difficult for different students.
Of course, right? We're all our own unique self. I think part of the piece, one of the pieces that I think is really important to underscore is I have an 18-year-old, also now 19 actually, who went to high school from the adolescent community here at Greenspring. And when she went on, she recognized that there wasn't a lot of opportunity for group work. And when there was, she said, most often the other students didn't know how to be on a team because they hadn't developed the skill. And so she ended up leading and doing the bulk of the work because they didn't know how to navigate that. And I want to underscore how important it is to build those skills. The Google guys now, you know, I think it was about a decade ago, they came out and said, STEM, 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 we need to teach all our students STEM. And we, you know, you're a math science person,
I am, yeah.
we love that. But also, now they've studied their highest performing teams, and they're finding that the teamwork, collaboration, knowing how to communicate, all of those things that you just talked about from microeconomies are the skills that their top performing teams actually have. And the science and math skills are like number 7th on the list of these qualities that these high performing teams have. So it's really one of the things that's so interesting in education. We call those soft skills,
but they're essential skills.
They're humongous, important life skills. And if we don't really take on giving them opportunities to really build them in a meaningful way every day, how are they going to have those skills when they go out in the world? How are they going to be ready? Right. So that I want to really underscore, I think that all of those things really make a difference. And coming up with negative $20. They're doing that before they're starting their first business when they're 21.
Yeah, negative $20 in this supportive context.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
It is actually real money. Not like the budget simulation is pretend money, but this is real money.
Right.
And it hurts because it's money that you could use to go out for ice cream with the class.
And even I know some schools have created microeconomies, because this isn't just about Greenspring, but they actually look at where do they put their money in charity and all of that once they create a system that really is profitable. Right. So and we can't wait to have that. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the other areas. First of all, one of the things that is really astounding to me is to have middle school not be something that is dreaded. like
Yeah.
every day of middle school, right? When I went to middle school, I was focused on um, the color eyeshadow. How could I wear blue eyeshadow? And I had a very cute boyfriend. And those were that was what I was thought about,
Mhm.
most of the time. I didn't have exciting projects. There wasn't anything at school that I remember being excited about doing. I had one English teacher who I remember at honors English, and she'd actually have us like do a project every once in a while. It was so exciting. But otherwise,
Mhm.
it was boring and I was just trying to get through it. Can you
Yeah.
talk about the student experience of being in a Montessori setting and what does it feel like for them when they're coming in?
Um, yeah, it's fun and it's chill. Those
Mm,
are, I think, two of the main characteristics of the classroom that they come in and they know they're gonna do work and they know they're gonna be held to that. But they come in and this year we start with reading. So they come in and they read and they kind of get past that sleepy point because the adolescents are still very sleepy at 8 in the morning. So they get past that sleepy point and then we connect and we practice conversation skills, and they share what's happening in their life, but then they also respond to each other and they build on and they ask questions and we build that community, guides and students, all of us together. And we've then got that relationship and we understand what's important to the students and what they're going to pull on in their fiction writing, but also what is going on in their lives at home, all of these pieces so that we have that relationship, which is foundational to anything with adolescents, is that you need to have that relationship because, again, they're looking to adult role models. Like, who do I want to be? How do I want to be? Do I want to be like this guy, like this guy? Do I want to interact with people like that, but be like this other person altogether? So we've got that foundational relationship. And I know I can pull on that. And I'll say, folks, listen, we need to come back because we really need this plan for this real deadline for microeconomy, or we need to come back because I would really like us to wrap up this unit on Polygon so we can go on to the next thing. But they're partners. They know that they're partners. And they know if they said, I'm really interested in going off on this tangent, I would say, oh, cool, let's go. So they know that they have that agency and that space to kind of say, this is where my passion lies, and that I'm going to be holding the guardrails of, I understand what you need to be able to get into the high school where you want to be. I understand what you need in order to have skills that are going to get you in the career that you want. And when they know that I have what they want,
mhm,
they're absolutely on my team. And so all I'm doing is helping them by saying, listen, a personal essay is a thing you're going to need. So we're going to write them. And they're like, well, we would rather write fiction stories again. And I know that they would rather write fiction stories again. But I said, okay, listen, you're welcome to think that these 3 essays were horribly written and that you don't like what the people in them said. But they are examples on the Johns Hopkins website of student essays that got them into Johns Hopkins. So you're welcome to have a completely different thesis. You're welcome to work with me on a different organization, but this is a skill you need and we're going to get there. And then they're like, okay. And then they come along because they trust me.
mhm,
And they also know that I trust them. And if they come up to me with a real need or a real question or a different alternative path,
mhm.
and they come to me with respect, which they always do, then I will follow them and I'll go with them and I'll say yes. Or I'll say no, and here's why. This line is a firm one, but we have a partnership. And so they come in and they feel safe and they're like, we're just hanging out in this classroom space where we're working, but it's also with our best friends. And they hang out outside of school, they plan these other trips, they, you know, group chat on the evenings, but they really like being with each other. And the school space doesn't change that. It doesn't impose a structure from me. This is the structure of how we're going to spend our time together. And you are going to do things the way that I organize them for you. It's like, we are going to spend this time together. Oh, you have an idea. Great. And that's that independence piece and that ownership of the learning. Because
Mhm.
they are going to go into an environment where they're told, okay, 50 minutes for science, here we go. But hopefully when I send them off, they have an understanding, this is how I work best. Like, I need to make note cards, or I don't need to make note cards, but I do need to like actually read out loud because that will land in my brain differently. Or I need to go home and draw a picture of whatever the concept is. So they have this self-understanding and they have the self-advocacy skills. I mean, that's so crucial because they have this trusting relationship with me. And so they're going to go into a new environment and they're going to see adults as partners. And we hear that from students who've left and who've gone on to other schools, and they say, well, yeah, I was really having trouble in science, so I asked for help. And the teachers, of course, are delighted. They're like, this is amazing that the student would come up to me and say, I need help on chapter 2, potentially before the test, before the problem becomes apparent to the teacher. And the students are saying, yeah, well, that's something that I've learned how to do, is to say, hey, can you please help me with this? Hey, this is a specific point where I'm stuck. And so they go and they self-advocate.
Self-advocacy. I mean, what a
Huge.
huge piece, because that's actually what allows you to know how to advocate for others as well, right? If they don't know how to advocate for themselves, they don't have those skills, period. Okay, so I know one of the pieces for parents is, okay, this all sounds amazing,
Right.
but what about the academics? How do you make sure that their skills, because we don't do grades.
Right.
So, that can be scary to people. Now, the feedback we get is the students do very, very well off in the world. The grades are there. That's not an issue. They tend to do well on tests. Not, some have some pieces, and of course, there's no magic pixie dust. But can you talk to us about the academic part of it and how they're constructing? You talked a little bit about the writing, but the math and the science, and what do those look like in a Montessori setting?
All right. Well, so I am a curriculum person, and Tamara knows this about me. And I make giant curriculum maps, and I look at all these different developmental pathways and how children are learning and how I can facilitate that. And I have all sorts of thoughts on this. And I think big picture, middle school is a process time. So we think about content and what is the content? What are the specific facts that a student knows? What are the very specific skills? Can they divide decimals to the 3 decimal places? And there's a lot of specific content, but that is much less important in middle school than process. So we want them to feel comfortable with drafting and revision as a writing process. We want them to feel comfortable entering into a math problem and searching for a way to represent it. We do that through our math seminar strands, where they have these novel problems they haven't seen. How could we abstract this? Can we draw a diagram that's meaningful? Can we use variables, so that they have these tools for representation? With science, one of the big themes is using evidence to support an argument. And this if-then reasoning. So if I set up an experiment this way, what do I expect the results to tell me? They'll show that it was successful, it wasn't successful, and why, or will it show me why? What do I make of what I'm seeing? Or how do I revise a design? So I have in my classroom right now a somewhat wobbly grow light that was designed by students, and they are never going to be asked to design a grow light, and they're not going to be expected to be able to draw a technical diagram in 9th or 10th grade that has things, but they are going to be expected to think through a problem and say, okay, what are the components that I need? What are the supplies available to me? How can I put this together towards a solution? And so that process, that problem-solving mindset, I think is really the big focus of middle school. And, on our report card, if you sit down and talk to me about my particular program, I can tell you these are all of the math skills and all of the different topics we'll be delving into. These are the different ways we're going to explore the writing skills. These are the different eras we're going to be talking about in humanities, and also these themes. Let's not name all of the wars in the 20th century. Let's look at what was happening and why, and how different forces interacted on multiple levels. And so I can tell you exactly what our content is going to be, but I think any middle school program, what we really should be focusing on is these thinking skills. And that's a place where our students leave and they know how to learn.
I want you to know that I've gone to one of Sylvia's Adolescents for a morning, and you gave the parents one of the problems that you'd given to children, to the adolescents. And we had to really dig in, and we didn't get the answer right away. It really required what you're talking about, like a depth of thinking that, at least for me, I hadn't thought about anything like that in a long time. And I never in middle school was given the opportunity to solve problems like that and come up with creative solutions. And part of what you had us do was share our different ways that we solved.
Mhm.
And everyone thought about it differently and came up with a different solution. It was just such a beautiful example of how to teach thinking,
Mhm.
support that thinking. And then we had some parents who it was frustrating for, and they didn't know how to move past the discomfort of it not being easy, right? And so it was really interesting to see that dynamic in play in adults, where
Mhm.
you're doing this work with the students and they get the opportunity to learn, okay, this is not comfortable. It's hard. I'm going to persevere. I'm
Yeah.
going to stick with it. If I really keep thinking about it, if maybe I'll come at it this way, maybe I'll think about it this way, but then they know how to persevere and really um, stick with things and problem solve and all of those pieces. I found that it's just one example of what
Right.
you're doing, but it was just such a beautiful example.
And the thing that's so sad in what you're talking about is these parents who feel the fear or the burden who have, and it always goes back to their own school stories. And that is just so sad to me to hear as an educator is, I didn't have this opportunity to play with numbers. I didn't have this space where we could explore. And I just, let's all go out and please give students the place to explore and ask them what they're thinking and ask them to talk and explain and be these active participants, because that's really going to stay with them and shape them, this ability to say, okay, I don't really know how to do this, but I'm going to look around and see what I know. And this is not just math. There's also, Montessori wanted students fixing up the whole residence where they were living. We don't have residential students, but we do have a toilet. And when it broke last year, I told the facilities manager, hey, don't come in. We got it. And so we took off the lid and we're like, what's going on inside this toilet tank? And it was a broken piece, so we figured out what piece we needed to order and we fixed the toilet. And just think about that. Now they all know, not just the toilet, there's so many household appliances. If it breaks, they'll be like, well, let me see.
Let me take a look.
Right, what's happening? Can I take this doorknob off myself? Because there are so many things, and that's another reason I think the bikes are so important. Technology can be in a place where we feel like, well, I can't possibly fix this phone or this computer. I have a degree in computer science and I know nothing about fixing any of the electronic technology that we have. But a doorknob, you can take apart and look at it and see how it works. A bicycle, you can see how the different pieces interact. And actually, so not all technology is opaque like that. I want the whole world to be something that you can pause for a minute, take it apart and look at it and say, okay, I can see how this works. I can see how my budgeting spreadsheet should fit together. I can see how this person's argument is laid out. Anything,
Mhm.
anything.
Well, and I absolutely love that, and I think it really speaks to raising people who are curious
Mhm,
and and empowered. Those are the 2 pieces that really resonate for me there, that instead of thinking and also not waiting for somebody else to take care of everything all the time,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
I think we have to be really careful to not raise entitled, people into the world, right? And what a great way is, "Oh, yeah, we can fix the toilet. We have the skills. We can do that."
yeah.
Right? Okay, so talk, if you don't mind, a little bit about not having grades. You came from an environment that had grades, right? And so here kind of,
Yeah.
right? And you so I think that for some parents can feel
Mhm.
scary, that why would my child be motivated to put their best effort in if you're not going to give them an A, if they're not going to be graded? Can you talk about that?
Yeah. I mean, so that A is so external, but also so disconnected from anything that the student is doing. So we do give grades when they're needed. When they need them to apply to high school, when they need a translation, then we say, "Oh, this has a purpose." so we'll give this to you. But the purpose of a grade to us is not to communicate about learning. We have other ways to communicate about learning. And so when I get your writing draft and I go through and I give you comments, the purpose of those comments is not to tell you that you're a good writer. It's to tell you, how can you make this piece even better? And when I give you comments on the math, I mean, I do give math tests with percentages and Spanish tests with percentages. And the purpose of that is to tell you, do you understand it? Because I feel like oftentimes students aren't actually sure where they stand, and they do want to know, where do I stand? And I don't want to give them a comparative measure, and I don't want to give them like a good job, medium job. What does that even mean? No, I want to say, I can tell that you've got mixed number operations, and you can tell because you got these problems correct. This isn't my opinion. This is the correct answers on these. Or, in fact, as just happened, they did not have mixed number multiplication. So I said, oh, well, we have some new information. And this isn't like a bad grade in the grade book. This is information telling all of us that we're going to have another lesson on mixed number multiplication. We're going to practice some more, and then we're going to come back to it. And so that grade as information, as feedback, and as a reflective moment. Okay, so I'm doing really well at speaking in class. However, my work is not on time. Because we do give feedback on so many categories. I have an 8-page report card that I'm working on right now for students, but what it does is it gives lots of feedback. And so it's not bottom line A or B, it is a more complex picture of, where are you succeeding? Where do you need some support? Where can you step it up as a student? Because this is to the student, it's not to the parent. You know, the parents get them, but this is a communication with the student in terms of, how are you doing relative to your goals?
And that makes so much sense, because and the students actually present their own information to families in that vein. I think the piece I want to underscore is that their motivation is not coming from this external grade. They want to learn because they want to learn. And that when you're marking up the paper, they get to look back and say, oh, I didn't get that right. I don't understand that concept yet.
Yes.
And if you get a grade and it's just done, then what's the motivation to go back and learn? I already got a C on the test.
It's over.
It's over, right?
Yeah.
Like instead of it being, and some students may go back and say, I don't know how to do that. That's foundational for the next step. But it was, my oldest went to a public magnet school, and several of her classes, she'd get back papers and she'd get 1 or 2 wrong, but they wouldn't tell her which one because they were reusing the test. And she was just incensed. Like, how am I going to know so I can work on the skill if you don't tell me what I got wrong? And for her, that was a Montessori upbringing, right? Like for her, it was all about learning the skill and understanding what she'd missed, not about the grade.
Well, because there's formative assessment and there's summative assessment. So formative assessment happens at the beginning of a unit. It's like, where are we? Where do we need to go? And summative assessment is at the end. And it's like, how much do you know after having participated in this unit? And I feel like almost all of our summative assessment is really in the hands of the student. How do you feel about your work? I'm not going to give you long comments on your final draft of your short story. We might do like a self-assessment rubric, or we might just share it out and everybody reads it and they give each other feedback, because that peer feedback is so powerful. But the question is not, how do I feel about your paper, unless it's a genuine reaction. When they're writing personal essays or something, and sometimes they say, this paragraph was really moving, or I am so impressed that this thing happened. And that's just my real reaction, because I'm not saying to them, good work. I'm saying to them, I'm a person you have a relationship with, and you just strengthen that relationship, or you just impacted it in this way, because you're saying to me, like, you're showing me who you are. And that is building our relationship. And I mean, I do that with math too. I know other people not so much, but it's like, this is so interesting. What did you just do? I am so fascinated by your idea, because, when you teach in this open generative way, it's not right, wrong, right? There are 17 right answers, and I haven't seen 13 of them. And so when you show me a new answer, you've now taught me. And this isn't that I'm glad that you thought the same way that I thought 5 years ago. This is that you've increased my knowledge. That's awesome.
That's awesome. Okay, so then how are you supporting the students? How does the Montessori classroom support students with building their executive function? Let's talk about that.
Oh, that's a big umbrella. We were just trying to unpack that, and there are, 6 to 8 subcategories in there under executive functioning. So, let me go through what are the pieces. First of all, I think one of the big ones that we think, well, one of the big ones we think about in middle school is the planning and the organization. I guess those are two. Organization of materials, organization of thought, organization of assignments, and getting them done, all of those pieces. And one of the things we know as middle school educators that often comes as a surprise to parents is that there is a giant regression in middle school as you get to this. So you have a very well organized 5th or 6th grader, they're doing their work, they know where their things are, and they come to middle school and their locker is a disaster and they forgot about 4 assignments. That's developmental. We know that's going on because there is this reorganization, right? Some of the neural pathways are being strengthened, but before they're strengthened, they actually are destroyed. So they lose capability as they rewire and build the new capability. And also their giant new distractions. Their peers are distracting in a way that they were not distracting 2 years ago. And so you get the situation frequently. I will be in a situation where it's 3:10 and I say, okay, we have 5 minutes worth of jobs really to do and a 5-minute meeting, and we have 20 minutes to accomplish this. And 25 minutes later, the students are just getting out the door because it's difficult for them. And so I think the first place is let's have some compassion because we know that developmentally, this is an age where students have to relearn skills that they already had. And of course, we support them. So we have in the morning, we have our planners, we go through our planners, we have an ambassador whose job it is to put assignments on the board, we check back in, we give reminders, all of these things where we're just helping them develop this internal system. And it's really analogous to how in the youngest classrooms, the children are learning where the materials go on the shelf or how the classroom is run. And these adolescents, I had someone, a very wise trainer, talk about time as something that adolescents are really sensitive to. They're starting to say, okay, I can kind of expect what's coming next. I need to have my work for that class. Hang on a second. And sometimes they're surprised by that. And sometimes they remember 30 minutes advance and they're able to shift things around. Oh, right, that's due. I'm going to sit down right now and take care of that. And we give them that opportunity in that space. And sometimes those reminders like, oh yeah, your story is due at the end of the day today. This might be a good time right now. And they all say, oh. So there's a lot of that building that muscle from scratch, really. Building the muscle of thinking about all of the things on the to-do list. And that's another place where microeconomy really comes in. And I will have to sit down and very explicitly say, what do we need to do? We're going to hold a bike sale. What do we need to do? And then let's back this out. So we need to first set the dates and check them a month and a half in advance. Yeah. And then we need to advertise, and then we need to make sure the bikes are ready. And how does that look? So there's a lot of planning of larger assignments like academic assignments, but also microeconomy assignments. Odyssey travel requires advanced reservations, requires this planning and preparation, sometimes alone, sometimes in a team, and often they can support each other, both in the classroom. Hey, remember this is due? Oh, right. And then at home, texting each other, wait a minute, do you have this assignment? So it's something that we collaborate on. The students and the guides collaborate on supporting this piece of organization of belongings and organization of time and tasks, which are more important. And I've so many times had this conversation. All right, so I'm hearing that your short story is not done and also your math worksheet is not done. Okay, which one's due first? Or which one is a bigger deal? The math worksheet is not going to inconvenience anyone, but the story needs to be read by your peers. So you better finish that one first and then circle back to me on the math. And so what's important, what's urgent right now, that's a conversation that's happening, I would say daily, but it's really like hourly in the classroom. How do I decide what to do and when? How do I organize my work time? How do I organize my at-home time? And especially when you have busy adolescents and they have all these after-school activities and they might need to organize on a day-by-day basis. I need to do 3 days worth of work on Wednesday night because Thursday this is going on and I'm like shot all day. And so those are conversations that we have a lot. But that is only one piece
Mm.
of executive functioning. And I think another big piece of executive functioning is the self-regulation, and that ability to kind of control your emotions is another thing we know goes haywire in puberty because the emotions are so big and they're so novel. And then the social situations are overwhelming. So the ability to name and talk about, like, I'm feeling really rough right now, and I'm gonna go take a walk before I get into my work. And
Mhm.
that's something that we do try and start with younger children, but the adolescents then become self-conscious. They don't wanna ask for accommodations they might need. They don't wanna ask for to be different in any way. And so talking with them about like, "Listen, we know that you work in this way. Like you and I both know this. And so how can we make that condition where you're going to be able to work successfully? Or how can we get this thing off your chest so that you can then get into it? Do we need to pull some students, have a conversation about a relationship? Or do we need to just let you work outside the room? Because right now, whatever's going on with those two students is so distracting that you cannot work. So let's give you a separate space so that what is it you need to enable that regulation? And what is it that you need to get back into the social connection? Because we know that estrangement is a huge part of adolescence. The relationships are constantly forming and reforming, and there's often somebody who's feeling disconnected, who's feeling lonely and hurt. And like, what are the avenues back in
Mm.
to peer relationship? And when is it a choice that you're going to say, I'm not going to go back into a relationship right now. We're going to have a colleague situation where we don't have a friend relationship, but I am going to look for friendship elsewhere. I'm going to understand my mental health needs. Because that identifying of yourself as a mental, emotional being and that those needs are also valid, that's really key. There's this song in Encanto, the Surface Pressure song. I love this song as a mom. I feel like it's about being a mom. All of the pressure and it's drip, drip, and it's the constant pressure. But the students were listening to this song and they said, this is about being a student. And there's so much pressure and it just keeps going until you're ready to explode.
Mm.
And that's what this character is feeling. And she's about to explode and she's losing her strength. And eventually the answer is relationship and sharing the burden. And so for students, they have this feeling of pressure. And if you're in an academic context where it's just like, get the grades, get the work done, get all these things done, you don't have that space to develop coping skills as a human to say, you know what? Right now, the most important thing is that I go and spend my sit spot time outside. Or the most important thing is I need to laugh with my friends. That's more important than getting my work done. And maybe it is. And having that ability to say, I'm going to balance my life
Mm.
because I'm in a place where I'm a whole human being. I think that's a piece of executive functioning that we sometimes neglect, but you can't self-regulate unless you're well. And you can't prioritize and plan and hold all of these things in your head unless they are within your capacity. So you need to strengthen your capacity. And sometimes you need to say no too. And that's a conversation. We had this fall, we had a student who was applying to high school and also wanting to run a haunted house and also. And I was like, let's talk about your capacity
Mm.
and let's pick because
Mhm.
these things are not going to happen well.
Mhm.
So let's pick a couple. So there's many pieces of this
Well, and I just
work.
want to, I think what you said, just we're talking about is so important because we get so focused culturally, so focused on grades and the
Mhm,
students' academics and achievement, 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 achievement. And for what? For status, status, status. I mean, really, and wealth. I mean,
mhm,
really, when you look at what are the motivating factors around, well, I just want him to do well. Well, what is well? What does well translate to and
mhm,
why? And when we look at that, how that is our underlying motivation, at least culturally, there's a lot around that.
mhm,
How, are we surprised then when our students and our young people are having higher and higher rates of anxiety and depression? Because that's not what life is about. Life is not about achievement, 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 achievement. And
mhm,
we're asking them to do like it's not meaningful. It doesn't feel purposeful. It can feel like just a burden. And it so often is the work is finding balance. That is our big work as human beings. It's our spiritual work, is what you're talking about, is actually having that spiritual part of ourself also fed and listened to, that the still small voice, and hearing when, you know what, I need to go for a walk right now, right? And I need to be out with the trees, and then I can come back and work on whatever the pieces are, and really starting to make decisions about what's important to them as human beings, and not just going through, the maze that somebody else has laid out for them.
And we're back to adult life.
And we're back
Right?
to adult life.
Because we
That's right.
need
That's
we
right.
need adults who can say, these are the choices I'm making, and I made them because I feel like they are the best for me, for my family, for the world. There's lots of systems of morality where people say, I'm going to step into this because I feel right in doing so. And that's why we want to have so many adults around who can model that too. The students are like, teachers don't make a lot of money. I'm not going to be a teacher. And I'm like, well, why do you think I might have chosen this profession? Why do people around you make those choices? What were their motivations? And who do you want to be? Because it is this self-centered time. It's this time of identity and visioning. And so what we do here is we really want to give them this expansive vision of possibility. Here are so many different ways that you might step into the world as an independent person who is happy with yourself, who understands yourself, and who is in relationship with other people. Because that's ultimately the Montessori vision, is interdependence, is people supporting each other in good ways, in right ways. When we look at all of the problems, I think that a lot of the issue with our world problems, with our environmental problems, is not seeing that large picture. And so what we're working on is giving these students the skills to say, I can stand as I am, I know who I am, and I can see the others that I'm in relationship with. And if that's how they emerge into adulthood, they're going to make not just moral choices, but sound choices that lead to happiness, that lead to that fulfillment. Because when you're doing something that is a fit, it's a fit for your mind, it's a fit for your body, a work of the hand and mind together. If it's a fit, then you're going to be contributing to the good of others. Then you're going to be functioning as this person who's well in society.
Drop the mic. I mean, that's the perfect place to end, right? Like that's the goal.
That's the goal.
That's the goal, is self-actualized human beings who have self-awareness and know how to be a contribution, and living meaningful, fulfilled lives. Right? That's it. That's it. Well, thank you. I'm so glad we finally got to do this. And I really appreciate all the different threads you wove in here today, so that folks can have an understanding of what does it really look like in an adolescent community, and to hold the whole child, really the whole adolescent, as you're educating and guiding.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity to be here.
Yeah, been a pleasure. Absolutely a pleasure. And to our listeners, thank you so much for spending your time with us today. We know your time is precious, and what we know is your work is so important. I say it's the most important work. We are out there. We are saving humanity, truly. Go to greenspringcenter.org to view the show notes from today's episode. And also, we invite you to subscribe to our podcast and hear the latest episodes, and to join in the conversation on both Facebook or Instagram. The work you do is so important, and we're here to help. Join us next time.